This video is about rationalizing the denominator or numerator of a fraction. Remember, rationalizing means simply eliminating the square roots, in this particular case, of the numerator or the denominator. It will be explicitly indicated what you have to rationalize. Case 1, the easy case, what to do to rationalize when denominator or numerator shows just one term. Here are the steps. Step 1, multiply denominator or numerator by the square root you want to eliminate. Step 2, simplify. Make sure that your answer is shown in simplified form. Okay, before I go ahead with the examples, let me show you here a nice property that we're gonna use a lot through this video. Property a square root of a times the square root of a turns out equal just a. In other words, when you multiply the square root of a number times itself, the square roots, they cancel, they get canceled, okay? And you just keep this number inside, which by the way is called the radicand, right? So let me show you some examples for you to visualize or to understand this property, this nice property. Suppose you multiply square root of 3 times the square root of 3. According to this property, square root of 3 times the square root of 3 should be just equal to 3. You may say, hey, but isn't it this equal to a square root of 9? But the square root of 9 puts you back to 3, right? So the property nicely works. Now, suppose you have a square root of 7 times the square root of 7. The square root of 7 times the square root of 7, according to this property, is simply 7, right? Simply 7. And this even works if you deal with square roots of variables. The square root of x times the square root of x is simply x, in case you must rationalize fractions, so in variables, right? You can use this. Okay, so now example number 1, rationalize the denominator of 3 over the square root of 7. Let's follow the steps. First step says multiply top and the bottom by the square root you want to eliminate. We're rationalizing the denominator. We're trying to eliminate square roots from the denominator, so we multiply top and the bottom by square root of 7. Now this is equal to 3 times the square root of 7 over square root of 7 times the square root of 7, which is just equal to 7 based on the nice property that we explained before, right? So now just make sure that your answer is expressed in simplified form. That's step 2. And here you're looking at the final answer. Good. So let's go to the next example. Example number 2 says rationalize the denominator of 10 over square root of 30. Again, let's follow the steps. 10 over square root of 30 here. We are rationalizing the denominator, so we multiply numerator and denominator by square root of 30, right? Step number 1. Now, this is going to be equal to 10 square root of 30 divided by square root of 30 times the square root of 30. We have a nice property that says that this is just equal to 30, right? We explained that nice property. Okay, so now step 2 says simplify, so make sure that your answer is in simplified form. So 10 and 30, they have common divisor 10, so in simplified form this will be 10 divided by 10, 1. We don't have to write the number 1, we just write square root of 30. And here 30 divided by 10 is just the number 3. Good, so now we can say that we are done we eliminated the square root from the denominator. We transferred it to the numerator, right? But that's okay. They just wanted you to eliminate radicals on the denominator. Okay, good. Let's go ahead with example number 3. Rationalize the numerator now. Numerator. So they give us this fraction, square root of 6 over 4. We have to rationalize the numerator. We have to eliminate square root on the numerator. For that, follow step 1. It says multiply by the square root. You need to eliminate top and bottom. So this will be equal to square root of 6 times the square root of 6 based on our nice property is 6. On the bottom we have 4 times the square root of 6. Now simplify. Step number 2 says simplify, right? Make sure that your answer is simplify 4. Notice 6 and 4 they have common divisor 2. So this in simplified form should be equal to 3 over twice the square root of 6. This is the final answer. Let's go ahead with the case number 2. So, rationalizing the denominator or numerator of a fraction. Case 2, denominator or numerator shows 2 terms now, 2 terms. The steps are, step number 1, between quotations, multiply numerator and denominator by the conjugate. I've written this between quotations because I gotta tell you how you're gonna do this. I'm gonna tell you also what the conjugate is. Step number 2, as usual, simplify. Simplify. Make sure that your answer is shown or expressed in simplified form. Alright, let's start by explaining what the conjugate of the sum or the difference of 2 numbers is. For that, let me just construct this little table. I'll give you a couple of examples. That should be enough for you to get it. Conjugate. Suppose I give you this square root of 2 plus a square root of 3. What should be the conjugate of a square root of 2 plus a square root of 3? Well, it turns out the conjugate is just the same thing except for the sign in between. So the conjugate of a square root of 2 plus a square root of 3 is a square root of 2 minus a square root of 3. Notice we change just the sign in between for its opposite. Now, what should be the conjugate of this guy? 5 minus square root of 2. Conjugate of 5 minus square root of 2, we keep the 5, we keep square root of 2, we simply change the sign in between minus for a plus, right? Good. So 5 plus square root of 2, conjugate of 5 minus square root of 2. Alright, now going over the example, is rationalize the denominator. Denominator, always pay attention to this word. Rationalize the denominator of 7 over 5 minus square root of 2. Solution. I'm gonna write here 7 over 5 minus square root of 2. To rationalize the denominator, we're gonna multiply both numerator and denominator by the conjugate of the denominator because we are rationalizing the denominator, right? So the conjugate of this guy we saw is 5 plus the square root of 2. So we multiply top and bottom by this 5 plus the square root of 2. Now step number 2, simplify, meaning just multiply this out. So 7 times 5, 35. 7 times the square root of 2 is plus 7 square root of 2, right? Over what? 5 times 5, 25. 5 times the square root of 2 plus 5 square root of 2. Minus the square root of 2 times 5 minus 5 square root of 2. And square root of 2 negative times positive square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is just 2 based on the nice property, right, that we explained at the beginning. So now notice when you multiply a quantity by its conjugate, turns out the radical part disappears, gets cancelled. Look here in the middle, right? So we're gonna have 35 plus 7 square root of 2 over 25 minus 2 is just 23, right? And this should be the final answer.